Cartwright. Used to work for a little company called Activision. I'm just saying bye to my good friend Jay Smith. I don't know if you were here to listen to his talk, but
thanks again.
Yeah, we go back about 10 years. After Activision, I had gone to a little company called Accolade. Then after Accolade, I went to Electronic Arts to kind of revive their PG Tour golf line. And the golf line was doing pretty good. And then this, but it wasn't breakout. It was okay. And this young up-and-comer comes along named Tiger Woods. And he says, well, why don't we sign this guy? And, how bad can it be? The worst deal, maybe he'll turn out to be like an Andre Agassi. He looks good on the box. And if it sells a few more units, that's great, but we don't really care. So we need to take the existing golf game, and we'll throw Tiger's picture on the cover and throw his image in the game, and we're done with it. So we need you to go out and find a little developer. It doesn't have to be really high-powered, just some people that are doing some game stuff on the side. And so I hooked up with Jay's company down in Santa Monica. He had a small team that was doing some PlayStation stuff, so I said, gee, I need to, I can't pay you very much, but I need to get 4 or 5 of your guys together, put this Tiger Woods image in the game, we'll call it a day. I can't pay you royalties, I just pay you, almost hourly. But don't worry, the project's only going to last a couple of weeks. And so Jay agreed. And the nice thing is I get to fly down to Santa Monica once a week, and Jay would take me out to play golf at the LA Country Club, which is so prestigious they don't even allow celebrities. Anyway, pretty soon it turned out that Tiger Woods was going to be a big deal. And the importance of this product skyrocketed. Of course, our contract with Jay was for very little money. And he says, look, this is turning into be quite a huge project, I need some more money. And of course, EA didn't want to pay more money. So EA said, why don't we do this? If the product sells 1 million units, we'll cut a check for Jay, some huge amount of money. I won't tell you how much, but it was huge. I said, we can afford to do that. He said, don't worry, it'll never sell that much. He'll never collect the money, and everybody will be happy. 3 months later, Jay flew up from Santa Monica to pick up the check in person because it was so big. So it was good connecting up with Jay again. Anyway, I see my former colleagues have arrived. So here we have David Crane, I'm sure you all know him, Garry Kitchen, and Glyn Anderson.
Good job. So we don't have an agenda. So why don't you guys tell us what you'd like to hear or talk about, and throw some ideas out, and then we'll improvise.
How'd you get started?
How did we get started? Why don't we start with Glyn?
How did I get started? Well, I was this young college student back in 1980, and a friend of mine was working at this little company called APH, and said, why don't you come, get a summer job, we need some interns to help us do these video games. Sounded like fun, so I went to work for APH. Now, APH was the company that created the Intellivision for Mattel, and as well as the handheld LED football game and all that stuff. And what we call the child confuser, the Mattel child computer. And so I got to do some work, little bits of code like the instant replay for the intelligent football game and stuff like that. Went back the following year, took a year's leave so that I could work there for a full year, and did a couple of intelligent games that I'm very proud of, but never shipped. And for one reason or another, that's good. So I come to the intelligent group, I'll talk about that. So the following year, being a little disillusioned with APH, since my work was out, another friend of mine had landed a job at the Pasadena Design Center, which was part of Activision. And so Glyn, why don't you come over for a summer job and do a conversion or something. And so I was Activision's first contract employee for a program release. And did the conversion of Steve's wonderful game, Mega Mania, for the Atari 800. And spent 7 years in Activision. And that's how I got started.
My entrance into the video game world is kind of interesting. I used to be Dave's foosball partner in college. We went to college in Phoenix, and it was about 120 during the day. And between classes, there was only two things to do. You could play pool, or you could play foosball. This was before video games. And I had played soccer in high school, so I kind of graduated to the foosball table. And Dave and I became friends that way. Later, I think he graduated, what, a year before I did? Moved up to National Semiconductor. Later got me a job there. And then Dave started working at this little startup called Atari. And Dave can tell you how he got into that.
That'd be on the Atari panel. No, it's true. As Steve said, we actually played professional foosball. I don't know if there's still any professional foosball going on around now, but in fact, there was $250,000 prize money in the tour. And so Steve and I played at college, but then after we got out of college, we started doing things like you cash your paycheck on Friday night, get on an airplane, fly to Minneapolis, and spend day and night playing foosball. And then Sunday night, fly back home and go back to work at National Semiconductor and that sort of thing. So that was our introduction to gaming. But yeah, I went to Atari, similar kind of relationship. I was a friend of Al Miller's. We played tennis together. And one night, he, after tennis, he said, read this ad that I wrote. To hire programmers to do video game programming in Atari. I proofread the ad for him. At the same time said, actually, that's kind of an interesting looking job. So that night I went back to my job at National where I had built their first computer and used it as a word processor to write up a resume. Interviewed at Atari at 10:30 the next morning and got a phone call over lunch that I was offered a job, and at 2 o'clock told my boss and gave him a 2-week notice. So it was about 8 p.m. the night before, I'm playing tennis, and by 2 p.m. the next day I've given notice and I'm off to Atari. But then of course came Activision, and Glyn mentioned the Pasadena Design Center. One of our philosophies with doing game design has always been put a small number of people who work well together in one room. Like a bullpen with cubicles around it, but an open space. And it actually worked out very well. If you were concentrating heavily on a game, you're actually hunched over your computer anyway, typing madly or scribbling on a piece of paper with mathematical equations or whatever. And people knew that because you're kind of hunched over, you don't interrupt this guy. But when you put it up there and you want to play test it, you roll your chair back, and then you stick and keep you for up high. And we play it, so everybody who wasn't doing anything else would just kind of roll their chairs over and say, well, that's stupid, And you really got a lot of, shared help in that kind of an environment. Well, that kind of environment doesn't work with 20 people or 50 people or whatever. And we found it worked really well with about 5 or 6. And we had 4 game designers at the time, and we said, we've got to hire another one, and we've got to somehow expand this business. And so Steve was a computer professional because he was teaching microprocessor programming at a trade school. He'd never written a microprocessor program, but he was teaching it. And so we brought him in, and he actually did some good homework. He got his job the hard way. He basically looked at all of our games, and knowing nothing about what the 2600 could do, he looked at our games. And he's thinking, he said, take that skiing game, and you actually change the graphics to a kayak, and you change the walls to like a canyon. He said, you could do a river rafting game. And he did that with every one of our games. He kind of like stole from what we had done for these new concepts to prove he'd really been thinking about it. And since I was kind of sponsoring him, when the other guys asked him, well, can you give us some programming examples? And he said, well, I've never actually written a line of code. They just kind of looked at me and said, all right, it's your problem. But that gave us 5, and that was a great size of group. And the Activision Design Center was our next, the next one. It followed the next theory of take a satellite location and put a half a dozen guys who are friends who work together really well. And they can have that same camaraderie. The actual first design center was the Eastern Design Center, happened to be in New Jersey. And that's because this guy over here came to us and already had 5 guys who had been working on designing games.
Yeah, I was, unlike everybody else up here, I was an East Coaster. And how I got started, I was in school originally for art. I had always drawn my whole life. And I was in art school for 2 semesters and then figured out I was never going to make a living doing art. So I switched to engineering, and the guidance counselor at the college thought I was out of my mind. But he said people don't switch from art to engineering, but I did. And I was in electrical engineering for a couple of years. Then I got a part-time job at a little tiny 5-person engineering company. And my job was go out and get lunch and go solder boards and do that sort of nonsense. And we were building things like calculators and photographic timers, generally pretty boring stuff, but it was using microprocessors. It was pretty cutting edge at the time. And then Mattel came out with the aforementioned little football game, the Blips. And we saw it, and somebody said, we can use the same technology we do for photographic timers and make a toy. So that was an interesting idea. We prototyped some toy ideas, and being on the East Coast, we went to Parker Brothers up in Beverly, Massachusetts, who was a leader at that time, and got a job with them. They said, we don't want any of your ideas, but we do have this project that we need engineers to build. An inventor had come in and given them a prototype for a pinball machine, a handheld pinball machine that used LEDs and kind of like the next generation after the Mattel football game. Problem was the guy had done it using about $3,000 in electronic parts in a briefcase, coming out to this umbilical cord. And they loved it, and they said, this is really good. It's about $3,000 worth of electronics. We need somebody to engineer it down to a manufacturing cost of $7. So you guys know microprocessors. What do you think? And what I've learned over the years is sometimes it's better to be completely ignorant, because if we knew what we were getting into, we would have never done it. But we just kind of said, yeah, that's fine. We'll do it. So we use a Texas Instruments 4-bit microprocessor. And we kind of all rolled up our sleeves, big company of 5 people. Looking back, I don't know how we ever got the contract, but that's beside the point. And we said, boy, this is going to involve programming. Anybody know how to program? And nobody knew how to program. I had fooled around with a TI-59 calculator where they had a little program language, and that was it. So we hired this big, fancy head of who was moonlighting, and this guy was a computer programmer. So he came in, and we did the hardware, and he wrote the code. And he spent about 10 or 12 weeks writing the code on sheets of paper by hand. And he would give it to the lowest guy in the totem pole, which was me. And I would type it for him, because God forbid he had to type. So I typed in these thousands of lines of this amazing code that's going to make a pinball machine. And I kept reading it, and I was reading it, obviously, I was typing it. And then we all gathered around the device, probably a month before the deadline. And it was, a little drum roll, we flipped the switch on, and nothing happened. And he said, wait, I know what it is. So he pulled out a piece of paper, changed something, handed it to me, I typed it in, we all gathered around and looked. Nothing happened. This went on for about a week. Right, must have been the hardware. This went on for about a week. And this was before I knew how to program and knew that you don't do things like write the entire game and then turn the screen on. So we had a meeting without him, and we said, what are we going to do? And I said, look, I'm just a college guy working here part-time, but I got to tell you, I don't know anything about programming, but that stuff I typed in, some of it doesn't make any sense. I mean, just intuitively I knew that, something was wrong. So they said, what do we do? And I said, well, I don't know, but it doesn't look right. So we drew straws, and they said, well, you typed it in, you fix it. So I learned how to program really quickly. And we ended up getting it working in about 6 weeks. It was Wildfire. That's why it was put out by Parker Brothers. The problem was when we got it working, and it was pretty cool, it was 3,000 bytes, and the TMS 1000 microprocessor could only hold 1,500 instructions. So we had 3,000 instructions. So that was a little small detail there. Now we had to cut the size of the program in half. And that was a lot of 24-hour, 7-day-a-week, kind of throw the college guy in the fire. And at the end of the day, we got it done, we got it out, it sold very, very well. And we would have, I mean, just ignorance is bliss. We should have never even tried to do what we did, but in the end, it worked out very well. So long story short, after that, I was still the lowly guy in the totem pole, and I was still making, probably minimum wage. And Parker Brothers said, hey, that's pretty amazing. Now we'll look at your ideas. So owner of the company number 1 had all these ideas and sketched them down, and owner of the company number 2 had all these ideas and sketched them down, and the guy in the back, while I was going out to get lunch, had an idea, and I prototyped it, because I was a guy in the program, and I made this little array of LEDs and made 2 that you could hit and shoot and hit together, and they bounced off each other for a pool table. So the head of development of Parker Brothers came down and sat in the conference room the entire day and looked at all the ideas from the senior guys in the company, and then at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they said, hey, go get Gary, let him show that stupid thing he's doing. So I showed it, and then I went back, and at the end of the day, said, what do you think? And he said, well, I like that thing that guy in the back brought out. So they ended up buying my pool table, which turned into Bank Shot, which I ended up patenting. And I went to these 2 guys on the company and said, I think I deserve a raise. And they said, nah, you deserve a raise. So then these guys started putting out games on the Atari, which would come out at that point. And the Atari was on a TV, so it wasn't these silly little LEDs. And it started walloping the handheld game business. And we were just getting rolling there. We'd done a couple of products. So I went to my boss and I said, we got a problem here. I said, this video game thing looks like it's going to be pretty hot. I think we should do video games because we're going to go out of business if we keep doing these little LEDs. And I said, you know what I'm going to do? I said, I'm going to go out, I'm going to buy one of these Atari machines. I'm going to open it up, I'm going to figure out how it works. And then we'll be able to do games on it. Because at that point in time, the only way you could do Atari games is if you worked at Atari and you had access to the confidential information. You couldn't go in the Barnes & Noble and buy a manual. And he said, that's a stupid idea, go back to your desk. So 6 months later, he came in the back, called a big company meeting, he said, I have a brilliant idea. We're going to go into the video game business. Everything I want you to do is go out and buy one of those machines and see how it works. Tell you, the guy was a genius. So I back engineered the 2600, and in the process, it took 6 months. In the process of doing it, I wrote a game called Space Jockey. And it was sold by my boss to US Games, and he made about 2/3 of the gross national product on it, and I got nothing. And then I went to him and said, now I really think I deserve a raise. And he said, no, so I quit. And after I quit, I was probably the only person east of the Mississippi who knew how to program the Atari 2600. So I got a call from Coleco, and they said, hey, we just licensed this arcade game named Donkey Kong, and we can't find anybody to program it. Are you interested? So I did. I programmed Donkey Kong for Coleco, and that was a huge success. They had 550 products in 1982, and Donkey Kong represented 25% of the total company revenue. So they were pleased with the results. And then, by this time I had my brother working with me, Dan, and I had another couple of guys, John Van Ryzen and another guy. And we said, well, what do we want to do now? And I said, well, Activision puts out the best games, and David Crane and Al Miller are gods. So I'm just going to call them. So once again, ignorance is bliss. I picked up the phone, and I asked for product development, and I got some guy on the phone, And after getting bounced around to 17 different secretaries, and I got a guy named Tom Lopez on the phone, and he said, "Hey, how are you?" And I said, "I program video games. I'm on the East Coast. I'd like to do something for you guys." And he thought it was like a crank call. And he said, "Why? What have you done?" I said, "Well, I'm just finishing Donkey Kong for Coleco. It's almost done." And he says, "All right, where are you? I'll fly right out." So he flew out, met us. This jived very well with their strategy for a second design center. So soon after, we opened the Activision Eastern Design Center. I finished the Coleco project, joined Activision, and I was at Activision from 82 to 86. So we were the first satellite office. It was about 100 employees. I think I was actually employee number 101. Worked at Activision, had a great time working with these guys for 4 years, and then the world changed in video games, and we all moved on. Just one other quick funny story. We knew we had gotten a deal with Activision. They asked us to come out and visit and meet the gods. Yeah, come to heaven and meet the gods. So Dan and I flew out to Activision. Dan was younger than me. He wasn't as good a programmer or designer at that point, but man, he was the best game player you ever saw. So we go and we meet with Tom Lopez on Scott Boulevard, and he says, "Now I want you to talk to the designers." So in walks Dave and Al Miller, and just a little intimidating, you know. By design, these guys are intimidating by design. So we sit down and they start asking us questions, and they have a 2600 there, and Al pops in ice hockey, and he goes, "You play?" So I said, "Well, Dan's pretty good." So Dan beat him. And Al was just sitting there like looking at the controller like, what the hell? And Dan had this shot he did that, you know, Al just finally said, "How do you do that?" And we got hired. That was it.
Well, it wasn't quite that easy. Tom Lopez came back to us afterwards and said, "You know, I'm thinking of hiring this whole group. And just like you guys have your lab here and you're comfortable with that size, we're just going to set them up in New Jersey." And that was actually the kicker, because we basically said, "Oh, that's great. You can hire them in New Jersey as long as we don't have to work with them." I know these guys from Adam. I mean, you know.
So then, just to hurt our egos, we're all excited. We joined on June 1st, 1982. Immediately go out to the June 1st Consumer Electronics Show in Chicago, which was the show for video games. And we are so impressed. Dan and I land at the airport. We were picked up by a limo. It's beyond belief. I mean, he said a year ago I was in my minimum wage job, you know, and get in the backseat of the limo, and oh my God, there's Larry Kaplan, another legend. So, you know, I'm sitting there, and my hands are shaking, and I go, "Hey Larry, how are you?" And he says, "Hi," and I said, "It's pretty exciting, nice show here. Company's doing great." And he looks at me and he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I used to have a lot more fun before we started hiring the new people." I was like, "All right." That's good.
That was Larry.
That was Larry. So, that's a long way around to how we got started. What else? Just shout them out.
What were the inspirations for some of your games?
Well, Dave,
Go ahead. We'll let Steve start.
All right, we'll go left here.
Well, as Dave said, one of the reasons I got the job was I looked at all our existing games and said, "Hey, if you took this and you turned it sideways and changed the car into a plane, and changed the guy into a skater, essentially make a knockoff," which I guess is the basis of the entire video game business.
We call it evolution.
Evolution.
There's a technical term for it.
Mega Mania, that wasn't so much a derivation as a direct ripoff. We used to go down to Chuck E. Cheese during the day, and I was struggling around for game ideas. I just finished barnstorming. I needed something original to do. So my favorite game was Astro Blaster. And this impressed me a lot. So what I did is I took some paper.
Anybody ever played Astro Blaster, the arcade game? Yeah, I don't know if there's one out there.
I took, paper and pencil and went down there and tried playing through levels and was scribbling on my notebook trying to figure out what the shapes looked like so I could go back and recreate it on the Atari. And I created it as faithful a reproduction as I can. Maybe that was before there were copyright laws. I don't know. And it's funny, some months later we actually interviewed the guy who had actually done the original Astro Blaster. The arcade version. You weren't in the room, are you? And he looked at Mega Mania and didn't even blink.
He made Steve go into the interview so that I could say, I want to talk to you about this ripoff. And he didn't even react. He must have thought it was a great game.
Steve is actually being humble.
Maybe he thought we had secured the rights to a port.
Right. Because Mega Mania actually was one of my all-time favorite 2600 games, and actually turned out better than the coin-op game. So I mean, all that work and tweaking really brought it to the next level. It wasn't an exact copy. I can show you games that were exact copies. That wasn't one of them. What about you, Dave? Do you have any memorable games you
Well, you want all 68? I just finished my 68th video game.
Wow.
Yeah, the most direct inspiration had to be for Freeway. We were at that trade show, the June trade show, and it's at Moscone Center, and you always stay downtown. They call it Miracle Mile, all the hotels are. And then to get to the convention center, you have to ride this bus down Lakeshore Drive. And Lakeshore Drive is 10 lanes wide. And traffic is usually stopped. And for some reason, they put all of the, for obvious reasons, they put all the low-budget parking on the other side of Lakeshore Drive from the convention center. So you're supposed to park over there and then somehow take a shuttle bus and here and up here. Well, what people like to do is just run across the street. They have to climb a chain link fence to do it on both sides. And a barrier there. But so we're driving down on this bus, and I'm watching this guy jump over the fence and go running through 10 lanes of traffic. And I said, that's a great idea for a video. And so I did Freeway, and there are a lot of ROMs out there of the various versions, including the one that was never supposed to see the light of day. But up until like 2 days before we were actually going to show it at a trade show, it was Little Running Man. There was no chicken in Freeway. And so we were just sitting there shooting the breeze, actually, with President Jim Levy, who was also head of marketing at that time. His company was sort of small. And we were just chatting away about, how to market these things. And he said, we got this trade show coming up in 2 days. I could hire a guy in a chicken suit to run around the show to, why the chicken crossed the road and all this kind of stuff. And he said, but it'd be nicer if the main character in the game was actually a chicken. And I never really liked the graphics of the man. You see it if you can get one of the bootleg ROMs. But, so yeah, I changed the thing to a chicken. 2 days before we took it and showed it publicly. And it made a lot more sense. Why did the chicken cross the roads? The commercial that came out was, the guy with his chicken coop. And it all kind of tied in much better, but that was absolutely last minute. And in fact, we were still a small company. There was a guy in a chicken suit in San Diego. He was actually called the KGB Chicken because he worked for a radio station. And he was so popular that he actually split from the radio station and he became the San Diego Chicken. And so he was paid to go to all of the San Diego Padres games and all this kind of stuff, San Diego Chicken. So we were thinking, San Diego Chicken, this is the guy we're going to hire. So Levy gets on the phone and talks to the chicken's agent. We got a trade show coming up, and we need to hire a chicken. Okay. And so the chicken faxed over his contract. It is a 5-page contract, and the terms. And the terms included first-class airfare for the chicken and the chicken assistant, which was this woman. Okay. And first-class accommodations, $5,000 for the chicken, and another $2,000 daily appearance fee for the chicken assistant. It was quite a deal. So
And the name of the ROM before it became a chicken game?
All right. Well, when you play Freeway, if the car hits the chicken, what should it do? Well, the chicken kind of squawks up and it goes backwards. That's a gameplay issue. In other words, if you hit the car, you should be demoted. You should lose ground. And the whole idea is to, and then you also it disables the joystick. So for a couple seconds, you can't move the chicken. So that's why you want to avoid the chicken. I mean, that's how we do video games. You got, bad things happen. It hurts your score, hurts your time, whatever. And we couldn't really make a game that was all that violent back then. We were selling to masses. But when it was still a little running man, I did change it for one version, where when the car hit the running man, he turned into a bloody red spot on the road. And I just called that version the Squish.
What went into creating like pretty realistic vehicle horn sounds and whatnot, as far as the audio on a game like that? What does that entail, and was there any like problems or mistakes that turned into a great thing? Or how does that work?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because, well, first of all, the horn sound. The Atari 2600 has very limited sound capability. It has some white noise that it can generate, it has some pure tones that it can generate, and it has some square waves that it can generate. And it turns out, I found this out serendipitously, but it turns out that sound was the easiest sound 2600 could make, it's the square wave. The square wave has this very tinny harmonic in it. But I don't know, now that you mentioned it, I vaguely remember a time where, people pull the cartridge out of 2600 while it's running and get all those vertical lines. Well, sometimes you'll get garbage, or you turn it on without a cartridge. It doesn't know how to power up clean, it's all about powering up randomly. And there was a time that I turned 27, and it did that, and I said, God, that sounds like somebody's horn this time. So I knew it was possible. But also, the other thing about Freeway is we learned a lot of interesting things in the real early days about what to do with the TV screen and how to make things pretty and that sort of thing. And people used to come to us and say, how come all the Activision games are so much prettier than the Atari games? Well, that's because we're now really, really, really motivated to develop new stuff, new technologies, new stuff. Because those guys were getting paychecks and we were trying to earn our paychecks. So we would use certain colors, only certain colors because they look really good on TV. We would put black lines around objects if we could because the colors used to bleed really badly on TVs. And if you did that, you got a much crisper looking picture. But what we learned from Freeway, which astounded me, was it's the most colorful game I ever did. And the background is great. You always think, okay, I've got all these colors, I'm going to get a beautiful blue background and I'm going to put this beautiful red thing on there. But it turned out, by using a gray background, I could make all of the objects colorful, and they popped. They looked much better, much prettier in the colors on the gray background. That was just one thing we learned from Freeway.
One other interesting thing about the audio in the 2600 was it could only do a certain number of tones, and when the chip was designed, there was no forethought to make those tones in tune with actual musical notes. So you would hear games come out and the songs were just enough to make your eyes tear. So when I did Pressure Cooker, I said, somebody said, oh, put a jingle at the beginning. And I said, yeah, but it's horrible. So what I did was I sat down with a keyboard and I went through every tone in the 2600 and I made a chart because some of them actually matched real tones that were musical. And then I hired a guy who wrote jingles for commercials. And I said, all right, I want you to write me a jingle, and here are the only keys. And I actually took the keyboard, I don't turn keyboard, and I marked the tape, the keys. I said, make me a song that uses those keys. The guy's name is Steve Gabor. He's great. He still writes jingles today. And that jingle at the end of beginning of Fresh Cookies is really cool. And it's done only using those notes. And it just sounded so much better, and it's just, that was the way to do it. And speaking of pressure cooker, just go back to the inspiration. I mean, when you're a video game designer, what do? You eat M&Ms, drink a lot of Coke, and go to fast food restaurants. I mean, that's like your whole life. Wait, it's still my whole life. But anyway, so there I was, standing in Burger King, and I see that little conveyor belt they had, where the patties started on one side and they went through this nuclear reactor looking metal thing and came out the other side charbroiled. And I looked at my brother, I said, you know, there's a game there. I could do something with a conveyor belt and burgers. And that was pressure cooker. Reflected on my culinary habits.
Atari sued Activision right out of the gate. This is sort of a three-part question. What exactly were they suing you guys for? What was the defense, and why did you ultimately settle on the court?
I wasn't part of that.
As the only one who was, I guess that's my question. Well, you asked why Atari sued us. Atari sued us because they wanted to stop us from doing what we were doing. You know, the reason we left Atari and founded Activision just in 30 seconds is somebody had just pointed out to us that these four guys at Atari were responsible for 60% of Atari's sales for the past year. And Atari's sales for the past year were $100 million. So there's four of us sitting here saying, we brought $60 million into this company last year, we're making $30,000 a year. And so we went to the president and we said, you know, we four must be doing something right, you know, give us a bonus or something, I don't care what. And the president looked us in the eye and he said, you know, this is a company, we all work together to make this happen. In fact, you guys are no more important than the people on the assembly line who work together. Well, that told us something about this particular guy. So, yeah, four of us left Atari and formed Activision. Well, they immediately said, wait a minute, those are our four best guys, how did we let them go? And so, yeah, so they sued, and that always happens when one company splits off from another, the parent company sues. And it's just exploratory. They say, well, they must have done something wrong. They must have stolen some great secrets. I mean, go rifle their closets, maybe there's some pins in the car, whatever. And so, in a lawsuit, you go through what's called discovery, where the lawyers ask everybody all these questions, and they're basically fishing around trying to find a problem. And I was the first to pose, unfortunately, so the lawyer was very hostile coming into this thing. You guys are scum, Never said that, but that's the tone of voice. And when I answered all the questions, by the end of the deposition, he said, you guys didn't take any pens or any meters, did you? He basically realized there was nothing that they had to go with. But once you've turned on the machine and you've got all those lawyers billing all those hours, the lawsuits, I mean, they go through all through discovery, and then they threaten that it's actually going to go to court and all that kind of stuff. And we did end up settling, and ironically, as a major owner of the company, I don't even know what the terms of settlement are because they were private, and the president signed them. And I think it was like lunch at the Lion and Compass or something. I mean, it was not a large settlement. It was keep it completely confidential so that nobody can see that we caved, that Atari caved. And because there was nothing there. What was the third part of that question?
That was pretty much it. What was the defense? Why was it separate?
Yeah, the defense was we were the good guys. One thing that Atari did, our first trade show, we showed up with some products. Atari bought a full-page ad in the CES Trade News Daily, and it was, attention, from Atari, and they said something like, "We believe that anyone who steals trade secrets from us and goes on to produce products and yada, 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 are scum of the earth," that sort of thing. And we looked at it and said, well, we believe that too. They wrote this thing to sound like we were the bad guys. But if you read it, all they were saying is, we don't think you should break the law. And it was kind of an interesting little PR attempt. that they made, but nothing ever from that either.
Yep.
Follow-up, did Activision ever sue any of the third-party developers for anything similar, or did, I'm assuming no, based on that answer?
I don't know of any.
No,
By similar, you mean spinning off?
Suing another third-party company for doing something very similar to what Activision was doing, or copying.
No, there were enough lawsuits in the game industry that Activision didn't need. The big lawsuit was the Magnavox lawsuit for the original patent, the Ralph Baer patent for two objects colliding and reacting and moving in different directions after a collision. And if you think about it, that covers about 96% of all video games ever done. And that lawsuit ran rampant through the video game industry from the first day of Atari until just a few years ago. And Magnavox never made any money off the Odyssey, but they made hundreds of millions of dollars off those lawsuits. I know I was an expert witness on many of those lawsuits. I know all the intimate details. And it was completely insane.
How prevalent were non-compete agreements during those times?
I don't think very much. I don't remember back then.
Like enforcement in California.
Right, in California you can't enforce them, so most of this business was in California anyway. Yeah,
They existed. I mean, everybody who became an employee signed an employment agreement that says everything you do while you're employed belongs to us.
Well, yeah, that's
okay.
Work product.
The non-competes came if you end up signing settlement on your way out. You know, like Bushnell. I mean, they said, we'll give you $26 million, but you can't do this for 10 years, you know, or whatever.
Did you have anything when you?
Nope.
No? You were free and clean.
Yeah, that was, it was a work for hire, and that's that.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, Garry split off of Activision with Imagineering.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah,
Imagineering select, absolutely.
And he did it even the more intelligent way. He said, we're going to split off and we're going to become a contractor of Activision. So he basically continued to work on a contract, so the company continued to actually make his rent payments for his office.
For a while.
For a while.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the way a lot of split-offs go.
That's what I did.
Yeah, it's kind of an amicable separation. Yeah.
They still get the benefit of the work. Can you talk about some of the other personalities like Larry Kaplan and Alan Miller, like what kind of people they were and working with them?
Well, Alan was going to come today, but he was under the weather this week. He didn't make it, which is unfortunate. Those were really, these guys, partners, because I was on the other coast, so I'll let them address it.
Well, I worked with Alan and Larry back at Atari, and Larry was, he'll be the first one to admit, he was the odd duck. He was the Berkeley grad, long-haired hippie. I mean, he actually participated in one of the Berkeley riots. He said we basically all got together and walked down the street, and then we got to the library and everyone went home. And that's how he describes this Berkeley riot, you know. But it's a pretty good example. And so he was the old man of the group. I mean, he was almost 30, you know. And he used to tell a story. He said, I have a real tough time making a decision, he said. And my parents always knew this. And if I'd been bad, they took me out and punished me. What they did is we went out to a food court. And they gave me $5 and said you can have anything you want for $5. And he said the whole family would be done eating if you're still clutching this $5 bill, running around trying to decide even what to eat. So Larry did have those times where it was hard to make a decision. And he actually dropped out of Activision's founding because he couldn't make the decision. And came back like 3 months later and said, I was wrong, please take me back. And Al's background, Larry did a software programming project for Atari. He programmed your stoplights. There was this huge computer system in Silicon Valley that managed all the stoplights and timed them and everything like that. He was the guy that would just sit at a stoplight and try to blame Larry. Al's background was in engineering also. He
was NASA engineer.
He worked for, he did memory test programs, RAM chips and things like that. So, it's a diverse group. And everybody had the same kind of idea, though, is But I grew up, I wanted to make something myself. I had art background just like Garry did. My mother was an art instructor, and so I had plenty of art teaching. And I said, man, I spent 4 or 5 hours painting. There's only one of them.
Yeah.
You know, there's just one. Having to Xerox it or something. But,
Yeah.
But so I like the idea of electronics and microprocessors and that sort of thing because you put all that work into it, and then you can mass produce thousands or millions of them.
Well, and in addition to that, once I had a taste of doing something like a toy, something fun. I mean, I don't think I ever worked on a project after that that wasn't some sort of entertainment thing. I said, I don't want to program databases for banks. It's pretty cool. Let's make games.
But that's actually a common thread for the early days video game designer because we don't have a team where we can, back then we didn't have a team we could just go out and hire an artist who's do all the art, and we hire a sound effects guy and stuff, hire a music composer and that sort of thing. It was very left brain and right brain. Very, very, very complicated technical. I mean, I tried to explain, I did a talk in college, and I tried to explain to these kids what your program was actually synchronizing itself with the scan of the TV set. You know, you're running along, it's just extremely complicated technical, but it also had to be artistic and creative and fun and that sort of thing. You had to have both of those sets of skills. So it's not all that unusual that we had art training before picking up computers.
I think you have to be a megalomaniac. Because what you're really doing is you're creating your own universe, you're the god of it, and you make the rules. And nothing's going to happen in that universe that you don't let happen. So, you know, you're a megalomaniac. I mean, to give you an example of Dave. Dave is god of his universe. He has a great story when he did Canyon Bomber about creating a new world and redefining nature.
Well, Canyon Bomber was a rip-off of an arcade game. The first game,
You burst in the bubble.
it was illegal. The early days of home video game development for the 2600 at Atari was basically ripping off copying arcade games, making home versions of their arcade games. You know, they had all these popular arcade games, and they were just putting a body in front of a computer and saying, "You don't have to design anything. Just here's a game, do it." And of course, they had $3,000 worth of arcade hardware, and we had one, 2 KB ROM, piece of hardware we weren't allowed to change.
Sounds familiar.
But yeah, I did a game called Canyon Bomber that had Canyon Bomber and Depth Charge in it, which was 2 of Atari's $6,000 or $3,000 arcade games. And I put 2 of them in a 2 KB 2600. And we had to have somebody in the marketing department write a manual for it. So the girls came over and they said, "We want you to show us the game so we can connect them." We're playing Canyon Bomber, and the way the thing works, you got these 2 airplanes that are dropping bombs, and you got things down here that are worth points. And as the bomb blows them out, they fall. And the higher they are, the more points, right? So you want to hit them when they're high, because if they go down low, they're worth less points. Your skill is trying to hit them at the top. And in development of that game, I had to make those things. If there's a block on the screen and there's nothing below it, I had to make it fall. And so I had to create gravity. If you think about it, I have to write an algorithm that makes them first realize that they're not sitting on anything, and then fall. And if there's another one below them, it's complicated because it's falling too, and it's not stopping them because there's nothing below it, And I sat there and I scribbled on a piece of paper. I, took out my textbooks, and I know gravity, the equation for gravity, and I'm doing all this kind of stuff and calculating it. Yeah, but this is a microprocessor, it doesn't have floating point math, I can't do this, I can't do that. I actually reduced the entire thing down to about 6 lines of microprocessor code. The pages and pages of equations. But it was pretty cool, and I had to create this gravity algorithm. So when you watch the things fall on a TV screen, to me, and to the guys who helped me and agonized with me over this whole thing, it's pretty cool that they could fall, because I had to go to a lot of effort to do that. So, but again, at the Atari days, I don't know if you remember, we have difficulties. Game select, right? And so we always had to do games that had a lot of options.
128 variations.
In air sea battle, you could have steerable missiles. You shoot them and you move, they go straight, or you shoot them and they move and they curve with you. You know, steerable missiles and all these different options, different kind of jet planes. You know, for whatever reason, the marketing departments have got to have lots of different games that these people can play. Even though it's the same old thing.
And no one ever played any of the first one.
So what we tended to do is we put on a feature and made it optional. So like you go out to game 8, it disables the gravity outward. So when the blocks or the bombs fall and you leave a hole, it doesn't fall. Now that changes the logic for the whole playability because it changes where the points are and all that kind of stuff, right? So I've shown them how the game works, and then I finally said, okay, now here are all the options. You're going to have to be able to describe these in the manual. So I go out to game 8. So here, we drop the bombs, and the bomb goes through, and the little blocks don't fall down. And the girls gasp. Said, "Why don't you make them stay up like No.
Any more? Go ahead back there.
Yeah, so my question is a marketing question. You guys had some of the best commercials that I've ever seen. I still watch them today. You had Phil Hartman in the ice hockey commercial, and you created a lot of drama around a product that didn't really represent the drama that was being created in that commercial. So I was just wondering, it's like the creative process that went into that. Was it like one marketing person? Were you guys involved in the creation? Especially like Pitfall, running through the jungle.
J. Walter Thompson.
It was just one person.
It was an agency.
Well, it was an agency, but it was directed from inside. The thing, if you look at Activision's legacy to the world, it's not as much Activision in the games. It's all the companies that respond afterward. I mean, you can just look at them as, Absolute and Acclaim and Accolade. And I find people that worked at Activision, and oh yeah, I started this thing over here. You want to ride my jet, and that's because it was really cool. It was very topical, this cool new thing, this video game thing. We attracted very creative people. It was unbelievable. And everybody worked their butts off. When we hit the milestone of $60 million in sales, we had 60 employees. So a company with $1 million in revenues per employee, everybody was just top-notch people working really hard. And yeah, the marketing and the sales people, or marketing and PR, that sort of thing. Sales is more of a nuts and bolts thing, but extremely creative people. There were so many. They wrote the best quotes for me. The best quote ever in a video game had to have been, or in an advertisement, was somebody. It was Pitfall Harry or something. I don't know. They're talking about Pitfall, and they said it's a jungle in there.
I think if you look back, I think there are times when companies are really in the zone, where the creative's working, the product development's working, the marketing's working. Those great commercials, Activision was truly in the zone at that point. It's kind of like where Apple is today. Everything was hitting on all cylinders. It was brilliant.
Claude Lafitte was the first commercial for skiing, and that was filmed in somebody's house. There were about 9 people in the crew, and they had a fireplace in the background. They kept smoking up the room, and they had a few stopping there. It was really a shoestring budget. And a lot of them actually had that kind of small production feel, but they were very creative.
Yep.
The thought has occurred to me that Activision didn't get into licensing anything, arcade games, movie or TV characters until much later. I was wondering, why the decision was taken early on not to license, if indeed there actually was such a decision, and why the decision was taken to get into that later on, around 84, 85 or so.
Well, I think licensing is a bad thing. It's an evil thing in the game industry, because then they just end up relying on some property. And how many licensed games have you bought that are really great versus all the ones that are crapola? And I'm talking more about licenses based on other properties. It's fine to take a coin out game and port it, and if you do a great job and it's exact, that's wonderful. I mean, obviously the entertainment value is going to be the same on another platform, hopefully. But when you start licensing films and TVs and blah, 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 and all that garbage, I don't like it. And I think that for the first few years, Activision really believed that they didn't need it. And they were coming up with a tremendous product, and it was the best, clearly the best in the industry at that point. And, you know, why share wealth with anybody else? That maybe a little bit of ego involved there. But I don't know, I wasn't involved with those decisions. But later, as Activision started licensing, I mean, there were some great licenses. Ghostbusters, big, genius license. But then you start going downhill when you start, you know, looking under every rug and seeing what 82-year-old TV show we can license. You know, then it really starts, you know, going bad.
A little story about licensed product. Steve, you remember what summer it was, but we all took a break from programming one afternoon and went to the local theater and saw a movie called Aliens. And left the theater, half the game design already finished, and went back to the office and went to our manager and said, we just saw Aliens, it would make a great video game, can we get the license for it? And he said something like, oh, we read the script months ago and passed. But Activision Europe picked it up and they're already working on a game. So we thought about it. We went back to him with a proposal. We said, if we promise we can produce a finished product in 90 days, will you let us do it? And we thought about it. It was a team of 5 of us, actually. Steve led the team, and I was on the team. Hugh Kaminsky, Gene Smith, and a great sound music guy named Russell Beagle. And so it took a few days, but he came back and said, okay, you guys can move ahead. And it didn't take us 90 days, it took us 30 days. And went through the test department. I don't know if we had more than 1 or 2 modes to fix.
I think the second disc we made, we shipped.
There you go. And
Well, that's because it had Glyn Anderson and Peter Kaminsky, who were known in Activision as 2 of the best technical people in America.
And Gene Smith.
And Gene Smith, who was the 3rd of the top 3 best technical people in the company.
so anyway, I think that was a licensing success story. I don't know how well the product sold, but I still think it was a very good translation of a movie product.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is, after the first big license, ET on the 2600, it's taken the game industry 40 years to recover.
We're done.
Finished, that's it. All right. Hey, how are you, buddy?